Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, and I consider it a privilege to sit down and talk with inspiring people with amazing stories from all over the world. And today's guest is a perfect example of why I record this podcast every day. His name is Cap Treeger, and he genuinely wants to help other entrepreneurs, especially early stage founders, in their endeavours. As such, he has a ton of actionable insights to offer, and also he has a big understanding of Atlanta's innovation ecosystem. In particular, he's involved in the conscious capitalism movement and is heavily focused on building caring cultures in the companies that he supports. And here's the thing, his new book is written in that pen name, Cap Treeger. And that's where things get a little mysterious, because he's not interested in boosting his own recognition. He's passionate about remaining anonymous. He genuinely wants to help other entrepreneurs and make a difference. What an incredibly cool story. I think that's something that we would all love to do. But I don't want to reveal too much now. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Atlanta, where he's waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Neil. I am in the U.S. I'm an entrepreneur and investor, and I've been part of a number of startups, and just had tremendous mentors in my life, and enjoy getting involved in causes now and trying to help others with their entrepreneurial and leadership journey.
And we have a bit of a tradition on this podcast where I try and take my guests back in time, and I'd love to find out a little bit more about their origin story. So can you share your backstory, or where your passion for tech came from, or just a moment that would ultimately put you on this path you're on today?
Yeah, it might have been an accident, Neil. I studied engineering in college, was a terrible student, drank a lot of beer, failed out twice, and So ended up working my last couple of years through college, paying my way through. And this was the early 90s. I'm pretty old. And so ended up working in a technology company, computer hardware at the time. And some friends started a business. So I joined them kind of going into the mid 90s. And we were, I guess, lucky to be at the right place at the right time. Sold that company in 1997. Was part of exiting another business in 98 that I sort of got engaged in, and started my own business. The first one I did by myself, a software company. So I guess I could say I landed in technology and startups by accident or necessity. It was the best sort of venue at the time, and just kept going from there.
It's a great story there. And you're also a seasoned entrepreneur and investor from Atlanta. And you recently wrote a book called Finding the Way, but under the pen name of Cap Treeger. All sounds incredibly mysterious. I absolutely love anything like that. So can you share the story behind that too, and the reason that you went under that pen name?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So I wanted to write sort of a business fiction book. A lot of my favorite books, a lot of people know The Goal or Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. I like business fiction. I guess we all learn in different ways, but anecdotes work for me. And not only that, but a lot of my learning from the businesses was truly experiential. And I thought anything that takes people in that direction. There's certainly plenty of workbooks. So I thought, well, I'll write business fiction. And writing fiction also allows you to sort of, I don't have to be true to the details, but it is absolutely based on real companies, real people. And particularly one of the companies that this was based on was the first company I started by myself. And, a lot of the people are still out there in the industry. It was very recognizable. Didn't want to throw anyone under the bus. And really all the characters in my book, even though they're may be primarily based on someone, they're combinations of characters and people. And so writing in a pen name sort of protects, I don't have to throw anyone under the bus. There's a couple of crazy stories in the book that, we had a guy running a porn operation out of our server room, things like that I just didn't want to disclose. But also it gives me freedom to say and do things. And the name Cap Treeger, I've always told people I was looking for a certain right number of names, a URL that I could buy that wasn't taken, that was kind of memorable. And I've always told people that I'm a capitalist tree hugger. So this name was a very quick, obvious decision. So Cap Treeger.
Oh, absolutely love it. And you've also been involved in founding and building businesses across so many different industries, from computer hardware and software to construction and farming. And you've also heavily invested directly in more than 100 early stage companies with a collective valuation in the billions of dollars, with tens of thousands of employees. So the question I've got to ask you, especially on behalf of all those startup founders listening and business leaders at various stages of their career, what were the biggest lessons that you've learned from this journey?
Well, it's interesting, Neil. I do think that there are some common themes. It's every time we start a new business, I learn a new set of lessons. So I don't want to pretend that everything is always replicable, but absolutely start with a foundation of integrity. If you don't, you eventually get in trouble. And it's just good to do business responsibly. And then there are certain things that I've found myself going through with every one of the companies that I'm invested or involved in, if they ask for mentoring or if I can help. And so there absolutely are universal truths. But I would say one of the sort of the biggest lessons. We like to start with a clear understanding of who we are and where we're going. And when I'll get to it maybe if you want, but when I wrote this book, there were a few things that I sort of look at differently. Yeah. But when you add all of those up, I was on another podcast, and somebody said, if you had to summarize everything in your book, what would it come down to? And it just suddenly hit me: purposeful intentionality. And I do the forensics on people who made it and people who don't. And even I was recently volunteering in a soup kitchen, and sometimes I'll end up in people in challenging situations. And then I'll walk into a boardroom with investors or successful people, and I ask myself, what's the difference? And there are probably a lot of differences, but one of them is I think a lot of the people who are successful had expectations. They were expected to go to college. They were expected to do well. And even among the 10% that didn't have those expectations, they created the expectations. They did some planning. Whereas a lot of the people I work with that have been challenged, I think they spend their life reacting. They spend their life, in survival mode. And so they've never been as proactive or intentional. And then I think being purposeful about it, understanding the importance of what you're doing, can be empowering. So I would say that's absolutely, sort of a common thread, whatever your business is. And I actually break that down into different components. But if I had to just boil it down to something quick, let's use purposeful intentionality.
And you live and breathe that. And just listening to you there, it's such a powerful story, talking about spending time in everything from soup kitchens to boardrooms and seeing the differences there. And what I love about everything that you've just said there is that you seem to have zero interest in boosting your own name, recognition, and want to remain anonymous. And it's not just about not wanting to be seen as throwing anyone under the bus. I think there seems to be much more than that. It seems that you genuinely want to help entrepreneurs, especially early stage founders, in their endeavors. So what advice would you pass down to an entrepreneur listening to this podcast anywhere in the world right now, especially those early stage founders? Is there anything that you would like them to take away from our conversation today?
Thank you, Neil. And there's so much I want to say, but and of course, as far as the name recognition, I'd like to point out that a lot of my best mentors, my best role models, are very modest. They're people that publicly you never hear of, but privately are doing so many great things. I'm sure people that they're not looking for personal glory; they just want to accomplish results. And so I was in a school recently here in Georgia, in the U.S., where I live. I had been there 10 years ago when the school system was really struggling, and I went back recently, and the school was fantastic. As soon as I walked in, I said, they've got a great leader. And sure enough, when we met the principal, the person in charge, she handed out credit for everything else. She said, the vice principal accomplished this, and this educator did that. I handed credit to everyone else, and then took blame for everything that was not as good. And she meant it. She was genuine. And it made me think the sort of the turning point for the character in my book was when he took, and I struggle whether to use the word ownership or responsibility. I personally think of it ownership, but a lot of people find that confusing because maybe they already own the business or they don't. But when it becomes less about saving face, looking good for myself, having an excuse, and more about just the results of the organization, just what gets us to finish. And so the protagonist, there were already resources, there were already mentors, there were already people teaching him the things that he needed to know. But it was when he really took ownership / responsibility about getting the organization there, and really felt like I deserve blame for everything bad, and I really want to give credit for everything that's good. Once that happened, then all the other things started to fall into place, and people looked at him different, and he looked at others differently. And so I just think, probably there's a big point when you're all about the success rather than your personal sort of, does this make me look good, or how do I protect my interest. Sometimes that happens, and that's the kind of thing I saw in that school, and when you see the right kind of leaders. So sorry, rambling answer, but maybe that would be a big thing.
100%. You weren't rambling at all. I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. And I always say on this podcast, yes, it's a tech podcast, but technology works best when it brings people together. When I was doing a little research on you, looking up your book, etc., I quickly learned that you're heavily involved in the conscious capitalism movement and bringing and building caring cultures into the companies that you help support. Can I ask you expand on this and why that's so important to you?
Well, I'm going to take a little bit of a yes. So, it's funny. I have a lot. I try enjoy being around different kind of people and challenging beliefs, and have some great, interesting conversations. I always feel like if anyone can show me where I'm wrong, that you're doing me a favor. And so I've got a lot of friends that have different perspectives on things like capitalism, and so I always ask, well, what's your problem with capitalism? And usually when you start to boil it down and the things they have a problem with, their problems are more with crony capitalism, which is, propped up by government or creating barriers, or unethical capitalism. And, if you start to distill it, I agree. I don't know anyone that wants crony capitalism or, people to do it unethically. And so I think there's sort of a bad stigma on capitalism from some people that don't understand what they're really against is sort of the opposite of real ethical capitalism. And I do think that it's brought us a lot of innovation and opportunity and things that can make the world a better place. And so I think doing the virtues of a meritocracy and things that help advance the world, I think we all can agree those can be good. And so I think the challenge is to assure that they're done right. So hopefully that's an articulation in that direction.
It really is. And another thing I always try and do on this Daily Tech podcast is put the location of where my guests are talking to me from on the map, because we all hear those stories from Silicon Valley, but the world is a big place. And obviously you're talking to me in Atlanta today. So can I ask that you share more about Atlanta's innovation ecosystem and a few of the things you're seeing there?
Thanks, Neil. Atlanta's really growing as a hub for innovation and entrepreneurship. You mentioned Silicon Valley, and I've been out there. I've invested in a couple of companies out there and enjoyed watching. I think we all try to learn things from their success. And I think Atlanta and a lot of the southeastern states, we've been in sort of an arms race. When I first started angel investing more than 20 years ago, I think there was the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina in the U.S. was sort of one of our competitors, and then Austin in Texas, and then Nashville in Tennessee. And now it seems like there's a lot of energy in South Florida. But what I've seen is it feels like sort of a rising tide lifts all ships. And, more than ever, I'm seeing businesses and leaders and entrepreneurs leave Silicon Valley and come to the southeastern U.S. and to Atlanta from New York and Boston. And so I do think there's an energy here right now and a genuine commitment from chambers of commerce and leaders to bring people here. We have a good climate, good health care. You mentioned the world's busiest airport. We have a lot of the ingredients, professional sports, plenty to do for lifestyle. And so I think people want to be here. We're learning about investment. We're learning about technology. We've been a leader in cybersecurity, fintech, health information technology, and hopefully we'll leverage those into successes in other areas. So would love to have you and anyone else come check it out.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. I'm learning more and more about the region and just how it is becoming a bit of a hub for technology now. I'm not sure if you follow the show, but I did speak with Larry Williams, president and CEO of, I think it was the Tech Association of Georgia, which is one of the largest tech associations in North America. They have something like 30,000 plus members over there to strengthen that innovation ecosystem.
Yes, and Larry, those guys are everywhere, and they seem to be in the middle of everything. And so give them a lot of credit, but also our chambers of commerce and a lot of our state leadership has been really committed to making this a good place to start and build a business. And I think we're getting better at it, almost every day.
And as for your book, Finding the Way, The Entrepreneur's Tale, can you tell me a little bit more about that and what readers can expect from the book? You said a few little teasers early on in our conversation, but I'd love to find out more about that.
Thanks. And so when I invest in a company, and I probably get 3 calls a week now from people saying, hey, will you mentor me? And I walk through the process. I've got, some things that I probably look at different maybe than other people in terms of articulating who you are and where you're going, understanding what your customer's really buying, looking at a business model that'll cause you to be at the right place at the right time, and getting the right pieces in place and in a sort of a little different perspective than everyone else. And aside from that, a lot of the business organizations that I'm in, when you mentor people, they tell you, whoever your mentee has to own the consequences. So instead of telling them what to do, tell them what happened to you. So instead of saying, hey, here's what happened when instead of saying you should fire somebody, hire somebody, sell your company, I tell them, here's what happened when we hired someone, fired someone, or sold that company, the mistakes we made, the things that we learned. And so I end up repeating myself over and over again. So I thought, why don't I write a handbook that we can hand out, and ended up writing, basing it around a company that I built and sold. But it's business fiction, and it's a story that sort of walks through my experiences, things that we learned, the mistakes we made, the things that mentors showed us. It's funny, a significant people or some percentage of people that read it say, hey, I want a workbook, I want a bullet points. But I've been shocked at how many people say I learned better from these anecdotes, from these tales. And so, and certainly a lot of my favorite books are that way. So essentially it's a story that sort of walks you through from the idea phase through some of the ingredients that I learned that hopefully can help people find the way to success.
Yeah, I recently read, I can't remember who said it, but it was, whatever you want to do in life, whatever you want to learn about, it's in a book somewhere. So find that book and you'll find the answers that you need. But what about yourself? You've achieved so much throughout your career. What's next for you, and what makes you jump out of bed in the morning and not just lie on a beach drinking cocktails? What's your big focus for the year?
It's funny. I was speaking to a business group, Neil, a few weeks ago, a YPO group. And I told them, I said, I'm more motivated than I've been in at least 20 years. And somebody said, why is that? And I guess my first thought was, maybe it started a few years ago when I was coming up on 50 years old. And it hit me, I've only got so much time left. And then it hit me, basically when I built the company that's in the book and some of the other businesses, I did it because I had to. There's your livelihood's depending on it. And so and then I had to raise my kids and get them grown and not in jail. And so suddenly, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I had fulfilled the things I had to do. And it suddenly freed me up to do things that I really wanted to do, needed to do. And so I started doing projects. We worked on a project to advance the cause for innovation and entrepreneurship in 2020. And while I was working on that, there was a 3-week period where 8 people mentioned prison reform to me. And somebody said, well, you need to do something about that. So the last guy that mentioned it to me was a good friend that had played in the NFL for a long time. And so he and I and another friend spent 2021 working on, I say prison reform, but it was really criminal justice reform, just opportunities, setting people up for success. And so had a little fun working toward that. This past year, we wrote the book and are trying to help entrepreneurs in a few different ways. But along the way, one of the things that's really hit me while we were walking through the prison, somebody said, everybody there is an entrepreneur. And one of the gentlemen we were working with had been in prison himself for a number of years. And he said, if you really want to help people, teach them to be entrepreneurs when they're younger, before they learn to do it outside the lines. And so one of the next projects I'm interested in looking at is reaching people at a younger age, maybe in middle school or before they're as likely to get into as much trouble, and teach them to be entrepreneurs sort of within the lines, bring in potential role models and leaders. And so I'm kind of excited about that as a potential next thing.
Now, there is, of course, a real pressure on everyone to be in a state of almost continuous learning to stay on top of the tech trends. I mean, last year, no one knew much about AI outside of the tech industry. Now, everyone's using ChatGPT. So I'm curious, where or how do you self-educate to keep up to speed with everything and the fast-moving world of business and technology?
Wow, Neil. There are too many resources, but I like you. I'm a learner. I'm a curious guy. I do read a lot. And when I still have mentors, a lot of my mentors are in their late 70s and well into their 80s now. And we swap books, and I still ask dumb questions. I often ask, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were my age? And some of my mentors now are younger, and they seem more advanced in some technology stuff. And so I feel like I can learn from them. And I could get lost on YouTube, just, videos of subjects that are interesting. So I think, again, being sort of intentional about learning, we all have different learning styles. Probably the easiest thing now is I can watch a short TED talk. I can listen to a podcast that you and others have done. And actually a huge fan of being able to get in your car and listen to a podcast. So, I think we all have our, some of our audio learners and I think it's managing toward a purpose, all the learning opportunities.
Well, I've absolutely loved chatting with you today. A real privilege. And before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more about that book, maybe there's a website for it or anything like that, what direction would you point everyone listening to find out more?
If you want to go to www.findingtheway.com, you'll find the book there. I want to migrate that more toward a community, a free and open community for entrepreneurs and leaders. But for now, the focus is on the book, and you can find links there to Amazon and Barnes and Noble if you're interested. And hopefully we're going to be adding more information and resources there soon.
Well, as I said, absolute honor to have you on the podcast today. And I loved hearing your story, how being involved in founding and building businesses across multiple industries and everything from computer hardware and software to construction and farming, as I said at the very beginning of the podcast, and almost investing heavily directly into more than 100 early stage companies, collective valuation of billions of dollars, and serving on more than 6 dozen boards. And I think we're approaching 2,300 interviews with leaders on this podcast, and people always ask me, saying, "No, you've spoke to so many people. What motivates them after that big exit, and not just sit on a beach drinking cocktails?" And for me, it's all about the curious mind, wanting to ask questions, wanting to explore, make a difference, helping others, and like that old saying, if you find something you love, you never have to work again. And I just think real happiness is doing things for others and not yourself. So listening to your story there about you going from soup kitchens, schools, early stage founders, boardrooms, and helping others, but not seeking that recognition and reward, doing it anonymously, I just thought, man, You're my spirit animal. That's what I was thinking. But just a big thank you for having me on the podcast, for joining me on the podcast today.
Neil, I can't thank you enough. You've gained a new friend, a new fan. I didn't know about you before I kind of started walking down this path, and now I'm looking forward to listening to your podcasts and learning from you. And just thank you. I can't thank you enough. Really appreciate the opportunity.
There you have it. What a refreshing story. Someone that's not interested in boosting their own name, recognition, building a brand, simply doing things for the right reasons, wanting to help entrepreneurs, especially early stage founders in their endeavours. And as I said in the podcast, for me, there was something absolutely beautiful in that. And I think so many people strive to spend their day sat on a beach drinking cocktails, or they strive to be just doing things for themselves. And take a look around on your news headlines, any of the rich celebrities or people living in their own bubble, or those memes of Ben Affleck that have been doing the rounds. It doesn't make you happy. What makes you happy is helping others, doing things for others. And whether that be in a soup kitchen, a school, or in a boardroom. Doing all that, I take my hat off to today's guest. But I am passionate about getting as many stories on this podcast as I can. So please, I want to hear from you. And whether that be your thoughts on today's episode, maybe you've got a question for me, or maybe you want to come on here, whatever it is. All I ask is you email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. We'll keep getting more inspiring stories like this on here, and we'll explore the world of tech and making a difference together. Now, I already have another guest lined up for tomorrow, so hopefully you'll join me for that. But until next time, don't be a stranger.